world you are. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Wi-Fi, if people aren't from here, you might want to log into the Wi-Fi because we're going to have a fun interactive poll which requires you to sort of use your Wi-Fi. So if we could just take a few seconds to do that. So there's a free Wi-Fi which you can sign into AdNet. You have to go into your Internet Explorer to actually to activate the Wi-Fi. And then the third step is you have to go into your email to verify that. So just before we begin, if you could help to do that. This is to use the poll, but like I said, if you just check the Wi-Fi first to make sure you're logged in. But while we're still waiting for people, what we can do is start with some introductions and introduce ourselves. So my name is Eleanor Slinger. I'm Regional Director for the New Statesman Media Group, as well as Investment Monitor, which is owned by GlobalData. So there's a few different companies there, but they're all owned by the same person. We're very pleased to have you here. I'm based in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, and I've lived all over the world, in London, Hong Kong. I've had some fantastic times in South Korea and Taiwan, and been in the FDI industry for over sort of 10 years, working in the marketing, communications, and business development sales area. So have a sort of wide range across that. And we have all the way from Belfast, lovely Glenn Bartley, our chief.
Hi everybody. So a bit more of a track for me. Yes, I'm the chief economist at Investment Monitor, which is a B2B website that focuses on FDI, and I'm head of FDI services at GlobalData.
So, if you haven't already, you can scan this, and what it will do is once the polls have opened, it will allow you to vote for certain questions, and it just allows us to have a bit more fun and be a bit more interactive. I will be asking some questions, and for people who are brave enough to share some examples throughout the way, so please do feel free to share those stories with us. But we will go through an introduction just shortly of a little bit about who we are. So like I said, GlobalData. So we are a PLC listed on the London Stock Exchange. We have 23 offices globally, including here in the UAE. The key thing about GlobalData is that we track over 700,000 companies in real time using AI, and we track across 18 different industries. So for anyone on the back, on the bottom right, it's medical, technology, oil and gas, in case you can't read that. So as you can sort of see, we cover a wide range of sectors. Including in GlobalData, we also have a media business which has 36 different B2B websites across a lot of these sectors. And if you add them all together, we have 65 million unique users which span across 200 countries. We have won many awards, as you can see on the bottom left, for content marketing solutions, best use of data and insights for our marketing solution, which is attached to all of this, called VMS. And in the bubble on the right, you'll see that there's 3,500 more FDI projects than any other databases. Thank you, Glenn. So I'll let Glenn sort of introduce our FDI databases.
Yes, so as Eleanor said, we have a lot of databases, which I think is one of the key things and unique features about this company. But in terms of FDI, then we do track, since 2019, we've tracked over 70,000 greenfield FDI projects. And we'll be talking a little bit about that as we go through the presentation.
One thing that GlobalData is known for is our understanding of markets and sectors. As I mentioned, we have 18 intelligence centers. We offer consulting across different sectors as well. We really are good at identifying potential investors and companies for your company to work with, whether that's using different data points or using insights across thematic areas like AI, COVID, and disruption, and digital tools and things like that. Our media side of the business help IPAs and companies to develop the right message to attract the right companies, and we do that using high quality data-driven journalism and through our websites, which have real global reach. Our websites are far-ranging. They're mostly B2B, so a lot of senior business decision makers that use our network are targeted for our clients through using AI. We help to convert these targets into investors through events, but also through content marketing and lead generation, and followed up with webinars and events. And just to show you some of the clients that we are working with in the region, we're lucky to work with Abu Dhabi Investment Office, DIFC, Hub 71, who are presenting here. Mazda City is the free zone partner of AIM, so do check them out. But quite a few across Africa, across Europe, and America. So just quickly, a show of hands of the regions that you represent, because there's quite a lot of different people in the room. Anyone here from Asia Pacific area? I know you used to work in China, so you can count yourself in. Anyone from Europe or CIS region? Welcome, thank you. And they're from Africa. Yay, welcome. And we've got anyone from Middle East locally? Regionally? Yes, no, you can double count. North America or LATAM? Great. So we have a large sort of audience here from Africa, which is fantastic. Welcome. And I think the key of what we're presenting a lot of this week is that sort of why Middle East Africa is the next big opportunity. So the reason why you're here is to learn a little bit about some of the ways that we are working with IPAs, but also talking about how you can build your roadmap. So Glenn, can you tell us a little bit about why we thought these topics would be?
Yeah, so I think obviously, we'll hear a lot, but COVID has changed everything. So what does building a new roadmap actually look like? So we'll talk through some of the key points that you need to be mindful of. We'll look at the key trends as well, and one of the things that we want to focus on is to change from the old way of doing FDI to a new way of doing FDI. So we'll take a look at some key thematic trends in order to do that. So in the bin goes all the traditional sectors. We're going to talk about themes. Identifying the right companies is obviously important to everybody in this room, but how to do that? Again, are we going to do the old traditional method of working off lists, or are we going to try and use new innovative ways to do that? And it's all about trying to work smarter, not harder, because we know that a lot of IPAs do have resource constraints. And what does an attractive content strategy actually look like? What are the key things that you want to focus on? Is it SEO? And how do you do that? How do you put your message across? Everyone talks about having the best proposition and why companies should invest in their location. Well, it's time to prove it now. We're going to talk through some of the best strategies for doing that.
So how do you know that maybe there are things that could be improved or things that are not quite working? Well, when we talk to clients, a lot of the time we hear that data and tech limitations are one of those blockers. So Glenn, I mean, you've been working in the industry for 15 years plus. Yeah. It'd be interesting to hear how technology and data has changed and why this is a limitation.
Yeah, well, I think whenever I first started and we were collecting maybe a few FDI projects here and there, and people are responsible for their own location, and now it blows up to where you can access data not just about your location, about other locations. I think the next big leap obviously is going to be AI, and I'm sure a lot of the events here will touch on AI, but what does that mean in terms of investment promotion? How can you leverage AI? I still think it's in its infancy, if I'm honest. I don't think it's not being used at all. As well as it could be within IPA, so we'll try and focus on that a little bit more, and I think just being adaptable to changes in the market scenarios.
And another big thing that we see a lot is the sort of leads that have been coming in, and I think with the explosion of social media, I've heard a lot about, well, the leads haven't been fantastic, and it comes down to the universe that you're fishing in, and I guess if the leads or the people are not the right target, that is a symptom, I'd like to say. So is there anything else that you've sort of seen change over the time?
Well, I think one thing with IPAs is everyone wants a lead handed to them. So everyone wants that lead that you're going to call up. Hello, I got passed on your details. Will you invest? Yes, thank you very much, and put the phone down. That's everybody's dream. And within different departments of an IPA who are responsible for different activities, we'll talk about the relationship between marketing and sales. But that bottom of funnel, top of funnel approach, you need to have a good proposition at both of those levels. And I think there's too much focus being put on that side. And just because a company is not interested in investing in your location now, doesn't mean that they are not going to be a good lead in the future. So you want to be warming up these, you want to be nurturing these leads. And as I said, it could be just about progressing that company further down the line. Whenever that company is ready to invest, is your name going to be at the top of that list in order for them to get in touch with you? So don't just think about the short term, think about longer term as well. This goes in focusing on startups, focusing on potential unicorns, and focusing on investors who are maybe not ready to make that expansion leap right now, but are in the future.
And the bottom of funnel problem, I think a lot of the time, as you mentioned, IPAs want the solutions now. They want those companies to invest in the next 12 months, but actually it takes time to build the top of funnel and to make sure you've got the right companies. Would you say that that's starting to shift?
Well, yes, I mean, most FDI projects on average take between 18 to 24 months. So whenever we're dealing with that process of getting a yes to it actually coming to fruition, it takes a long time. But as I said, I think it's important about that process of not just focusing solely on the short term, about medium term and longer term as well.
And just one last thing about having people on the ground, boots on the ground. I mean, I think COVID taught us a lot about how that can be a strategy that can not work for you if you're not able to travel. So are we still limited? Is the IPA industry still limited by the boots on the ground, would you say?
I think it's still important, and we know hybrid working is here to stay. I think it's a real opportunity, especially for regions like Africa, where for big investors, so you've got your US investors, for example, to actually get them to come to Africa, not just Africa, but other regions as well. It's very difficult. So this new way of hybrid working being acceptable is actually a good thing and a positive thing for a lot of IPAs, but you need to take advantage of that. You need to be hosting your webinars, you need to be engaging with people through digital means. This is the way that a lot of people are researching. So you need to make sure that your proposition really stands out in that level. However, physical events like this one are still going to be useful, but maybe it's more about picking and choosing the events that you go to in person and trying to ramp up your online presence a little bit more.
And you touched on a little bit, and we will talk a lot more about it, but live investor signals is also something that is changing over the time that we've seen.
Yeah.
So, the first poll is going to be nice and easy for you. I would love everyone to participate. Like I said, you might need to refresh your Wi-Fi. When you scan this QR code, it goes straight to a poll. It doesn't take long to vote. It'll be very, very interesting to hear if anyone is brave enough to share a bit of a story of how your company has essentially pivoted during COVID lockdowns and what you did to change that. So, is there any brave souls in the room that wants to stand up and share a short story with us while we collate the results? Ricardo, don't look down at your phone, I'm looking at you. Thinking of people that I know. I'm sure that in your area it must have been really difficult to stop traveling. I mean, do you have any stories to share with us about how you guys, what you did during those lockdowns?
Well, I can say that we did indeed have to reassess our FDI attraction strategy during COVID. As everyone knows, lockdowns, you can't travel, so you kind of have to start.
So Ricardo, can I stop you there? There's going to be a mic just to help so other people can hear you. Sorry, just 1 second. And welcome to the people at the back of the room. We're just doing a quick poll, so please scan this. If you don't have Wi-Fi, please sign into the free AdNet Wi-Fi and verify your email, and you can vote on the poll too, so please join us. Sorry, go on, Ricardo.
Yeah, so as I was saying, of course, during COVID lockdown, any company that is heavily investment oriented has to reassess its strategy, because you start living in a new environment, a new world, a more virtual world in which Zoom, Google Meets, and all of those Microsoft Teams meetings were the new reality. So of course you have to kind of tailor your strategy to start getting more digitally heavy. And in Africa, the digital reality is still something that's kind of growing. It's something that is not very prevalent, but with COVID, a big boom happened. So a lot of companies were going digital, a lot of companies were trying to get into virtual webinars, a lot of things of the nature. I know I myself, in 2020, I must have participated in over 5 webinars, and comparing to what I've done the years before, which were practically zero. So that it shows that how the trend evolved, and also the team that I had around me, that works for me, by the way, I'm the business director of the Luanda Bank Special Economic Zone in Angola, and so all of my area I had to kind of mold and start taking in new technicians that also had more of a digital component to their CV to kind of help foster that new paradigm shift when it comes to attracting digital FDI, because and also your presentation had to be more visual. For example, you had to start showing more videos because people couldn't go to you, so you kind of had to get more of a visual aspect to your presentation, because as we know, people don't invest in what's unknown. They have to know, they have to see, they have to make sure that what you're selling is indeed a reality. And so it was a bit of a challenge, but something that we took to the heart, and I believe today we are where we are thanks to the way we shifted towards the pandemic criteria. So I think it's something that's phenomenal, not only for us, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in this room can relate to the way COVID kind of shifted our perspective in how we do business.
Right.
Brilliant.
And did you find it that the sort of inbound was a bit more difficult to get? Was it like the same volume of meetings that you would typically have if you had physical meetings, for example, or was it a bit harder to?
I actually think it was, we had way more meetings that were virtual than in person. Because in person, what happens is you have to kind of like, either we have to go to them or they have to come to us. And so you have to kind of get into schedules and agendas and booking flights and all of those nuances. But COVID kind of showed us that you can do all of that just by sitting at your office. So we actually managed to get, I myself got in way more meetings, way more productive meetings than before COVID.
Great. Well, that's a fantastic story, and I think a lot of IPAs did jump on the Teams and the sort of Google Meet that sort of thing. And I think there's also a next leap, which we're on Tuesday talking about. What is that next leap, and how can we sort of accelerate that even further? But for anyone that's just joined us, if you can scan this QR code, it's a poll so that we can actually survey some of your results. So we're just asking a question here. Please sign into the free Wi-Fi. So we can talk through the results and discussions now, and Blaine can sort of go through some of those now. So just 1 second. So yes, Glenn.
So perhaps unsurprising that nearly 3/4 are continuing, well, did change their strategy, did pivot, and are progressing. I'm quite interested more so in the other two, actually. Do we have any examples of people who did change their strategy but have since reverted back? Anybody brave enough to talk on that? Come on. See, we don't know who did this. Okay, that's fine. And then know that it's just continued as the status quo. But I think most IPAs that we've spoken with have pivoted, and as mentioned there by Ricardo, then are continuing with that. And I think it's really interesting as well, where hopefully one of the things that you find is then that people that actually are coming, that you're getting there, are very qualified leads that you're getting. So again, this whole qualification phase has changed, and we've seen a really good example there of how it's changed in a very good way. So I think if we can flip back, Polly. It was just a nice, interesting one to warm up. I actually thought it was going to be closer to 100%, if I'm honest. I'm going to pin these people down afterwards. So one of the things we want to look at now just is what is an FDI strategy. It does differ between locations, and obviously it differs between who you're targeting as well. But what is the need of your agency? So what are you trying to do? Or, what type of FDI are you trying to attract? Is it traditional greenfield FDI? Are you trying to attract institutional investors? Is it M&A that you're trying to focus on? Traditionally, again, it's been more along the greenfield side, but we are seeing that changing and developing. And also, what's the purpose? Is it to create jobs? Are you wanting to bring in companies that are going to do exports? Right up to the government level, you should be working in order to define that. And who's the key driver of this? So who's actually driving the whole strategy plan? And we've mentioned there that it could be a couple of drivers, but ultimately there has to be one driver of this strategy, and then have to have supporters around that, and that would be the wider team within it. So for example, your head of inward investment promotion, your CEO equivalent, your supporters, your business development managers, your marketeers, connectors. So this could be academia, this could be other industry organizations. And one of the key things I really feel, and I know that it's difficult to do, but the champions, so companies that you actually bring in and are successful, trying to leverage those a lot more than what is currently being done. It's something that we whenever we're working a lot with IPAs, that they don't do enough of, and as part of that discussion, whenever you win that investment, to really leverage that for the next company that you go to talk to. Can you make the connection there? Can you get good testimonials? They can really stand the test of time on your website as well. Your website should be plastered with testimonials from successful companies that have come in, and also companies that sing your praises, not necessarily just the location. I think that's one thing that gets missed a lot, that investment promotion, there is the personal touch to it as well. So all of you guys are brand ambassadors for your location. And what we always think the success of is company X invested in location Y. But what was their experience with you? And can you leverage that, and can you get companies talking about how good you were? One of those things is, in terms of the branding then, is to be recognizable and to be consistent with it. So, and can you stand out from the crowd? It's an incredibly crowded marketplace. What's your awareness then of the investors and the audience that you're trying to work with? And we'll give some good examples again about how you can try to get to investors before they even know that they might want to do an FDI project. Proposition development, obviously is key, but out with the old. Let's stop saying that we're high quality, low cost location. Let's really delve down into the niche subsectors as well, and we'll talk about themes again on the next slide. And to be data driven, this is key. If you're wanting to attract tech investments, you're wanting to attract digital infrastructure, you have to be a digitally focused agency yourself. You can't get away with it now. You cannot hide. You want to be a leader in this. So if a company comes and sees that you're being really innovative, you're using AI, you're using new technologies, you're being able to respond to them very quickly, it gives a very, very good perception of you as a company and you personally. And another key thing is to try and keep the materials up to date. Something that we see a lot, and I was giving an example there to a friend of where we see IPA websites that they get past their sell-by date, they redo the website, it looks amazing, and then after 1 year, all the stats that they have on it, they don't update. Something like COVID happens, all those stats are completely irrelevant now. So trying to keep that up to date, and again, this may be thinking about your wider team for the CEOs that are in this room. You want to try and have more tech-focused people in your team as well. And then looking at attraction, so what are your key enablers? What are your assets? What's your proposition? What does it look like? What are the challenges? And do you want to identify those challenges as well? You shouldn't hide from the fact that you do have some weaknesses in your proposition. And I actually think it's a benefit to be more upfront about that, because they're going to find out anyway. A company's going to find out. And if you're trying to hide these features, then it's not going to bode well for you. So, and try to address them and try to say how you're working with the government as well, and how you're trying to revise policy and strategies. And can you use the example of an issue that might convert to an investment? Can you use that to your advantage to try and get a policy pushed through? We can bring this company in if we do X, Y, Z. What are your key target areas? I've kind of touched on that. And your investor targeting and outreach, I think there's a much more sophisticated process now. No longer is it trying to download a database of a list of companies that you've no foresight on. Have they even been classified into the right sector? Years ago we used the NAICS codes and SIC codes, and that's what we said. And even to try and align those up to what's on an IPA website now is very difficult. And then we have all the new industries like renewable energy, which doesn't even have an SIC code at the moment. To be data driven as well, and attending events we've covered as well, but to be authoritative as well. I think that's one of the key things as well. You need to really drive the investment. You need to come across as very knowledgeable, and that's just not being knowledgeable about your own location. You want to be knowledgeable about the industry as a whole, and that's bringing in different data sets in order to do that. But what we see working with companies and investors is if you can give a very good oversight of the industry, how it's changing, and then introduce your proposition after that, that's a really strong thing to do, and a lot of agencies do not do that. Cannot stress enough the importance of your website. I've hammered home the point already a couple of times. It's the number one thing. World Bank did a study a few years ago now, and it's still the number one channel that investors use to contact an IPA. Now, there are still issues with that, and Eleanor will talk to some of those points later on. Not all companies will know about your agency or know to get onto your website, so you want to go through the right media channels to be directing people towards your website. Ultimately, that's what everyone wants, and get that contact us point. Support services as well. How can you guide them through the process? And that's another thing that's missing a lot from websites. Everyone has their target sectors, and you go in, you get a nice overview, talk about the quality, talk about the cost, and that's it. What is your introductory process? Invest Georgia have a good example of this and tell you the workflow. So they say, if you come and speak to us today, here's the next couple of steps that that takes you down that process. Extremely important because there's different rules and regulations, obviously, in different countries. And then aftercare, I think in COVID, then we've seen a lot of aftercare, and your existing investors can also be potential expanders as well, so do not forget about them. And partnerships, we've kind of discussed. We did a study, we did a poll actually, and I found that for a certain client in a certain region, that over 50% of those companies went through an intermediary and didn't go through an IPA. It's really interesting. So how much FDI are you missing by not partnering with the right intermediaries? Recruitment companies, banks, law firms, all of these should be singing your praises. It's in their benefit to bring these investors in for them to get the business. So leverage them, jump on the bandwagon, have them on your website as well. Show that full package. And that, again, I've talked about champion investors and then new potential investors as well in different agencies. And then just finally, how do we actually get there? So putting all these things in place, and this isn't everything. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to do with that, but hopefully it gives a good overview. And see people taking photos. We'll let people take a few more before we move on. And also knowing when to pivot, when to adapt. So something like COVID, obviously, most agencies pivot, but don't let it get to that level. Don't pivot only when you have to. Try and pivot in the right way, and again, try and be forward thinking, try and be leaders in this. And it goes back to all the other ways, be authoritative, be data driven, be insightful, and try and put across thought leadership as well.
I'm just curious to see in the room how many people work for different functions. So just a show of hands. Anyone work for management and strategy kind of area? Anyone work in business development, investment promotion area? You would probably say everything, right? As management. Anyone work in marketing, communications? Okay, fantastic. And data analytics? Very good. Okay, well, the point I kind of want to make here is that there's been an explosion of data, of insights, and I just wonder whether any IPAs here have actively recruited data analysts as part of the sort of job descriptions in the last sort of 3 to 5 years. Has anyone changed the sort of talent of their team to cope with data? Okay, it's interesting. There's a lot of IPAs that perhaps are still catching up with that trend and hiring the right kinds of people and figuring out how they fit into the business and how they sort of fit into the workflow of the business, what kind of data you can get access to, and what kind of data is input and output, right?
And I think just one point on that as well, Eleanor. If you're talking to an AI company to open up a new R&D center in your location, imagine just being able to say, "Oh yes, we know the importance of this because we just hired somebody yesterday, or we hired a team of 5 as well." So again, it's about you can have the proposition that you have that most people are singing those praises, but what's the actions as well, and what's the reflection on your agency and on your location? So I think it's a key point as well to keep up with the trends, to show investors that you believe what you're trying to attract, you're actually living that experience as well, is really a key point. And I know it's hard to do with resourcing, and there is different constraints, but all comes back to do you want to be a top IPA, or do you just want to be a follower?
And also it's about predicting and forecasting what's about to come, because I imagine we don't talk too much about sectors in this workshop, but sectors are changing, and so it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on how do they sort of stay dynamic and on top of the changes.
Well, I think even going back to the first point there about institutional investors, that's a very different conversation to if you're talking to a greenfield investor, and you maybe need a lot more knowledge in that area as well. So. Of course, data, whenever you're talking to data people, and if you have your sales team are divided out by sectors or things like that, they have to keep up to date. Again, back to one of the other points that we just made as well, that you don't need knowledge just about your location, but you need to know what's going on everywhere else in the world as well. 1, so that you can come across as very knowledgeable, but 2, so that you can really pull out what is the key, what is the USP about your location compared to others.
So we've got the second poll, which we're about to open. So if anyone has just joined us, welcome. We have a bit of an interactive poll here. If you have Wi-Fi, if not, please get free Wi-Fi using the free AdNet channel, and make sure to verify on your email to access your Wi-Fi. But all you need to do is just scan this QR code and vote for the top themes impacting FDI. And so while you're doing that, I just wanted to ask Glenn, what is a theme and why is this important?
So the way that we look at themes, they're cross-sector. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to influence any votes. But the traditional sectors and the way that we're approaching companies is changing, and now the different types of operations that can be done. But what are they can be tech-based themes, they can be macro themes. So I don't want to give too much away. Let's let people vote, and then we'll discuss.
So hopefully everyone's got their vote in. Let's see what you said, because I think this is a very interesting one for us. I mean, GlobalData as a company tracks themes which is cross-sector. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the presentation, GlobalData tracks over 18 different industry sectors, but it's really important to make sure that there is some correlation between those sectors. So as you can sort of see here.
Perfect. Can we scroll down a little bit, Pauline? Very good. Excellent. So quite a spread. And quite interesting. So we see the likes of obviously geopolitics, very, very important at the moment, knowing what's going on. And again, that's coming into the more macro thing. Strategic partnerships, I imagine maybe a few of the African people here voted for that one. Very interesting as well. AI, we've been speaking about that already. Interestingly, digitalization, only 20%. Very, very interesting. Energy transition, 40% as well. So can we just go to the next slide? And just nothing for cloud, nothing for mobile. I know we did put a max of 3 on. So yeah, can we just go on to the next one, and we'll ask some people. So this is actually we track themes against FDI projects. So yes, we track what sector it's in, what subsector it's in, what function it's doing. But we're also tracking the theme. So digitalization is the #1 theme in FDI. Supply chain and logistics, so lingering issues again coming on from COVID are still there, and we have some of the other ones. But look how many tech-based themes. So with digitalization, we've got cloud, mobile, 5G, AI, and tech diversification. So the majority of the top 10 are all tech-based themes. We do have geopolitics in there as well, and energy transition and supply chain. And as Eleanor alluded to, we have a whole thematic team. So we actually have a product offering that focuses on themes. So you get all data, companies, everything based on themes. And I asked the head of that department, what are your top 3 themes that you think companies should be looking out for in the short term? And his answers were AI, energy transition, and geopolitics. So again, so it's good that they're in the top 10. Makes it easy for this chart to build it. But obviously they're not 3 that's at the top. So in FDI, companies are moving for that digitalization. They're moving still for cloud and mobile and 5G. Granted, this was based on data for 2022. So one would expect certainly AI to go higher up that list. I think energy transition's in a really good position there. We're seeing year-on-year increases. Renewable energy was the only sector in FDI to increase during COVID, consistently increasing. But the geopolitics, obviously, you've got Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you've got US-China decoupling, and I think there's going to be a new world order in terms of FDI. We're going to see a lot more friendshoring. So there's going to be a lot more trade and investment with countries that you're friendly with. So again, this is something to try and stay ahead of the game on. So if your current target sectors are a country that could cause some issues or be involved in some issues, do you pivot? When's the right time to pivot?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. How can IPAs pivot? So it's about receiving that insight, that data before it happens, with things like this, but also what do you do with that? So how does a country that might be embroiled in geopolitical forces sort of talk about that sensitively? What do they need to change?
Yeah, well, I think it's it is hard. Let's not get away from the fact it is hard. But you also have to be, there's pivoting and there's also looking into the future as well. So one thing is geopolitics causes this, but there's also brand new emerging markets in terms of source markets. So the US is the number one source market globally, but what we're seeing is a change in where those companies are investing. So especially last year, we've seen a huge decline in US FDI into China. But what was that in lieu of? Well, we've seen a big uprise in US FDI into the likes of Malaysia and Vietnam. So those countries need to be mindful of issues of competitor locations and to try and use that to their benefit. But yes, obviously, if your own country is embroiled in anything, it's very, very difficult. We've seen Russian FDI come down dramatically. It's next to nothing in terms of greenfield. Again, are we going to see many Western countries invest in Russia? I don't think so. So Russia as a country is going to have to look for new forms of investment as well. And the flip side of that is Ukraine. I think there's going to be a real increase in FDI in that as foreign investors help try to rebuild the country. So I think it's very difficult, but you need to have that intelligence in order to make informed decisions. What we've always said is you can be given data and be given intelligence, but you have to try and make the informed decisions with that.
And that will change from different region to region, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Country to country.
Yeah.
So one thing that I guess we want to hone home here is that these things and these forces are changing constantly, and every country will have a different version of this graph, and it's going to be very difficult to orientate that. So firstly, it's getting the right information from the source and making an informed decision, like you said. And
yeah.
I think one thing that we do and GlobalData does really well is provide that information very easily to IPAs especially, and to companies in the language that they need to receive it in, and then to almost give you the roadmap to how to pivot. So whether that's a list of companies or whether that's these are the target source markets, and actually helping you do the homework for you, because I imagine at the time there's no time to stop, pivot, re-strategize, hire an expensive consultant, come back to the table, go to the board. If there's a way to accelerate that, obviously we'll be happier for that. So I think one thing we want to make a point of.
Yeah, and sorry, and just if you are having any conversations, bring up this chart. Talk to an investor and say, these are the 10 things that we understand based on a very, very, very good data source, are key themes, and how do they impact you, and which of these is most important to you, and then try to evolve your proposition around that. So you can really see the difference in some of these in particular. How many people, so yeah, we'll use geopolitics just as an example. How many people would include any messaging about geopolitics on their website?
No hands?
No.
Zero? Or is that...
Anybody do thought leadership around that? Anybody creating content to talk about that? One, yeah, very good.
Is that also because it's sensitive and it's difficult as a public sector government agency? And is that a problem? Can I sort of get a show of hands if that's kind of a reason why you can't talk about things like geopolitics, which is practically on the minds of all the companies that are coming in to invest? Because if that's the case, then obviously we'll talk about this in later stages, but the content strategy and the way, the channels that you use to talk through these themes is really important. So you might not want to put that on your website or your social media channel, but you might use a third-party partner to be able to help you communicate that message, to show them that you understand. And I kind of want to pick on our friend up the front who represents a company. I just wanted to understand if a country was talking to you about some of these issues, and if they didn't understand that perhaps supply chain and getting things into that country is a big problem, does that persuade you, dissuade you? I mean, how important is it for the IPA or the country trying to attract you, for part of your expansion plans? Are you able to share something with us?
You're asking me this question.
Yes, I am.
I lived in China for 7.5 years, and during COVID I was there full time.
Yes.
So if a company doesn't understand supply chain issues, I would be hesitant to go to that market.
Okay, that's really interesting. I mean, it seems obvious, but I imagine...
Very obvious, and I give you some examples. I come from APAC. In APAC, Myanmar is within our geographical network.
for Hilton as a group. And when what happened, political issues in Myanmar, we haven't pulled out, but we are definitely not pushing forward our expansion into that market, even though it is very attractive. So I think that explains the reason why supply chain and logistical issues could be a potential threat for FDI and for expansion for companies like Hilton.
And I guess if you're a true partner, you don't hide the difficulties. I think you talked about that earlier. I mean, you need to be able to communicate that there might be issues with the supply chain right now, but these are the solutions that we're providing. Here are some of the partners. Here are some of the ways that you can work through that. I think it's thinking about how you communicate these slightly negative key messages on the right channel. So it's not that you can't communicate it, it's using the right channel to communicate that, or using your champions or your ambassadors to help you to display that key message. So we have one more poll and then we will be breaking for soon. So the next one, please, anyone that has just come into the room, we're doing an interactive poll. There's free AdNet Wi-Fi that you can sign on to so that you can scan this and vote online. You do need to go into your email to verify the Wi-Fi, just so you know. But what we're trying to do here is just identify some of the ways that the key issues with using digital and data tools, because I think the first half of our presentation was talking a little bit about how much data is out there, how much digital tools have advanced over the time, but when I'm talking to IPAs around the world, there is still a big sort of hesitancy about adopting these. And if it's not about adopting it, it's about how to actually implement it into the workflows. So two very different things. A lot of people want to sort of implement or adopt, but actually pushing that all the way through their company is sometimes quite difficult. Is there anything else you want to add to this point before we see the results?
No, I just think that that's it. You don't necessarily need to be an expert in using data tools, but it's what can you get out of it. So if it's helping you get from A to B a lot quicker, a lot faster, it's more efficient, it's getting you better results. That's the angle that you should be looking at for digital tools. You don't necessarily need to be using it yourself, but what can you get from it?
So we'll have everyone stop the poll and then we'll show the results. Interesting.
Okay, so what have we got? Okay, so very interesting one. So the top one, difficulty in combining different data sets from different providers. We hear this all the time. And so the key thing, and what we do here at GlobalData, a little bit of a self-plug, is that we have data, we have consultancy, and we have marketing tools as well. So we're trying to do that, and it's all on a single platform as well. So you want to get industry knowledge, you can get it. You want to get FDI knowledge, you want to get a list of companies who are opening green hydrogen plants, you can get that. And again, what we try to do is that what we see a lot with databases is that you get a demo of them, you maybe get a training, and then you don't have to use it for a few weeks and you forget about it. And then you log back in and you can't remember quite how to use it. You're a little bit embarrassed, you don't want to go back to your account manager doesn't keep in contact with you, and it depletes out until renewal comes up and the account manager comes back on to you, hey, how is everything? Renew with us, please. So that's where what we try and do is we actually have analysts who work with. So even whenever you're on a database, we have an Ask the Analyst function as well. So if it's something that's a little bit complex to do or might take you a bit of time, you can just ask an analyst and get that output from you. So again, that's, you know your start goal, you know your end goal. You maybe don't have the time to do all the work on databases, but you can still get the end output that you want. So that's one. Another one we hear often is too expensive, and I think that's something, and Eleanor's going to speak to this in a couple of slides as well, but actually look at your ROI that you're getting from it. You could subscribe to a database for maybe $10,000 or whatever it might be, and you land one investor and that pays for it tenfold. So what else have we got then? Limited capacity to cover all sectors, themes. Yep, absolutely. Again, something that we're trying to we always try and do, and we create themes as they happen. So whenever COVID became a thing, COVID was a theme on our side, and we're pulling in all our data around COVID, and you've seen some of the other themes that we talk about as well. So yeah, probably not too surprising with what we have, but thanks very much for voting.
So we covered some of these points already, but I think low quality, outdated data. I mean, how do we even know that it's outdated?
Well, sometimes you do get the year on the data, but a lot of the time you get a company list, you Google that company and it doesn't exist, or you see websites like Open Corporates and it says it's inactive. So has anybody experienced this? I imagine quite a few people. Show of hands, working with outdated data or data with lags. Yeah.
It's also the fact that COVID shut down quite a few companies, and a lot of companies showed sort of declining performance, which actually affected whether they wanted to expand. So any lists that you had pre-COVID shouldn't be used effectively, because a lot of those companies have changed. Limited capacity to cover all sectors. Now I know IPAs in a room want literally all the sectors. They of course want to welcome every sector, whoever wants to come invest in your region. However, sometimes we do need to pick and choose and focus so that you're not spreading yourselves out too thinly.
But I think with this as well is it's about trying to condense that information down into a platform that's usable for you. So you want to be you want to be able to analyze data more in more detail if you want, but you also want those overarching points. What's the key takeaways that I can get? I want to do some analysis, but I don't want to do a lot of work for it, and we'll touch on maybe generative AI, because that's going to be the next phase of this, I think, where you actually subscribe to a database, and then instead of actually setting up a search and downloading information, you just type the question. I want to know FDI trends into Africa in the last 12 months, and it's just going to tell you an answer. So that's the thing. So the AI bot then does have that lagged effect. So we're trying to, as over time, I mean, it will start to become much more real time. But that's where I see the future of things going. But I think it's important. That's what I mean. You want to be pulling in. Is there a webinar that you could view? Is there a report that you could read? Is there the actual data itself? So there's different types of data that you could be absorbing, and to have that in one place is important. So I can log in here and I can get access to a plethora of data, and I can choose what format I want to view that data in, rather than having to go to this database to get information about a company, this database to see if it's done FDI, this database to see who the key contacts are of that company. You want to try and have that all in one platform. So that's what I would definitely advise in trying to think about that and trying to go for a single source.
But let's not forget that sometimes the data is historical data, and we're not always looking in the past. We actually want to predict the future. So then having the ability, like thematic data and changes in the company, and to be able to track past data to current data is also really important, and then marrying that up with the macroeconomic picture.
Yep.
So that's something that we pride ourselves on being able to be a bit more dynamic, to have live signals as opposed to sort of just relying on 2021 or 2022 data. But we've talked a little bit about the different data sets. I think that was the number one problem with combining the different data sets. I mean, this could come back to the fact that you guys haven't hired any data analysts in the last 5 years, that you voted no. So no, I'm just kidding. But it is something that I find a lot of IPAs say, that combining data, putting it into the CRM, maintaining that, storing that, tagging that, it's a job in itself, but perhaps there are other...
Well, we have, even an example of this in terms of, hiring the right people. So we have different media titles, and we've got, highly qualified journalists who are able to write about topics in depth. Very few of them can use data. Very few of them can use an Excel spreadsheet. And our process is working with data journalists as well, and we have a data team that are feeding them that information. So they can finesse and they can make it sound very good. And again, this is in terms of content planning. Are you getting the right data through, and are you talking about it in the right way as well? So there's one thing having all that data, but being able to finesse it, being able to know what the key strengths are, and being able to talk about it in the right way is something else as well. So there's even difficulty in working across different data sets, but also within different teams once you have that data.
And then the taxonomies is actually something, a bane of your life as well. Trying to sort of identify and tag companies in the right sectors, and sometimes I find IPAs talking about products rather than sectors. I want to target I'm trying to think of an example now, but that's not a taxonomy that perhaps your partners might be using. So just think through how you can sort of align with your partners or your media partners or your data providers to just make sure that you're all talking the same language, because otherwise we just all get confused as to what you're actually trying to target.
Software is a very good example of that. You know, one database will call it software and IT, another database will call it tech, which might include communications and software and IT. So it's very difficult then to say, here's a trend of companies in software and IT, and I'm going to match that up with FDI and tech. But you could be showing two completely different things. So again, trying to...
I think cloud, people want cloud providers.
Yeah.
Cloud providers are from Microsoft, who might be tagged as IT,
Yeah.
BPO, other things. So I think it's just really important that if you're going to give a brief to any partners, any consultants, just to be very, very clear that we're all speaking the same language. Is it a sector, or is it a theme, or is it a product that you're actually trying to attract? But lack of dynamic feedback at 10.53%. So I just wanted to understand, you know, why people thought that. Maybe it's because we don't know that there are platforms out there that can provide insights into whether your strategy is working. So one thing that, you know, we try to do is actually provide you insights into how your campaign is performing, so that you can change and pivot your campaign, your marketing campaign, or whether it's your communications message, accordingly. So if you don't know that these feedback signals are out there, how are you to know that your campaign is working?
And you know, one example of that, especially in marketing, is you put an advert in a paper, or you put an advert in a magazine. How do you know the performance of that? You know, so again, this is the old traditional way of doing it. So you might get an influx of investor inquiries. Does that come directly from that advert? Who knows? Whereas if you're doing this online, and as Eleanor says, you can actually monitor. So Eleanor will talk in a lot more detail about our process, but once you post content on one of our sites, you get a dashboard. You see what companies are viewing your content in real time. So you know investors have some sort of an interest in a particular article, whether that article is about fintech, whether it's about energy transition, XYZ. So then whenever you go to start a conversation, you know exactly what you should be starting that conversation with. You say, oh, here you might want to talk about renewable energy, you might want to talk about green hydrogen. So again, instead of focusing just on the sector that company's in, you actually know what some sort of a level of interest in a particular niche area or topic.
Well, just on that point, the people that respond to an ad or come to an event are the people that you've converted. But imagine the pool, if you could draw a picture, that would be the very small part of the wider universe that you've actually gone out to target. You don't know what happened with the other part of that, which would probably be 70 to 80% of your prospective clients or companies. So I think it's really important to have tools that can tell you who are those 70 to 80% that didn't bother to tell you they weren't interested and why. So that's something that we kind of want to make a point of. The other main issues that you highlighted was the inability to effectively navigate and share information from such tools. That didn't rank that high, but there's a couple of you can sort of hire the right people to do that, but not enough resource to use the tool, and unfortunately this is something that we hear very, very often. We'll talk a little bit later on working smarter, not harder. It might not mean that you need to invest in another desk in another country. We're actually condoning the opposite. It's one-to-many approach is much better than having a one-to-one approach always, right? So thinking about having a digital-on approach is really, really important, and always-on digital approach, I'm going to say. Too expensive was, I think, the largest, or 21% of you voted for too expensive.
Second largest, yeah.
I mean, the cost is always in the mind, the value is always in the mind of the buyer, right? But at the end of the day, it's about weighing up your costs and benefits. If you don't realize that there are all these the different tools that can actually help you with your workflow, increase from that 10% of people that saw your ad to 100%, and you're actually talking to 100% of the market, obviously you would think differently. But I think the number one key thing that I see a lot of is the inability to educate stakeholders who are not here today, who are not listening to what are the new technologies. How do you talk to board members about why you need to invest in a new data analyst or a new data tool or a new sort of marketing channel that they've never heard of? Of course they've never heard of it. So how do we do this? I think it's about making sure that we understand the value of what you're trying to do, trying to measure the opportunity, and making sure that whatever tool you do go with, you have a measurable ROI. And today with digital tools, there's no reason why any digital provider can't provide you a measurable ROI. So it's no longer acceptable, even in the media industry that I work in, to just say, put up a banner ad and not give you results. Or put up a print ad and not tell you what the circulation is. There is always an ROI, and there will be some providers that don't want to. There will be consultants that there are a lot of grey area, but actually there are a lot of digital tools that can help you to measure that. So ultimately gaining savings. So just to go through some of the things that, as Glenn said, we sort of offer, it's the ability to target a larger audience globally. So if you don't know which markets to target, then it's going to be a bit difficult, so we can help to identify that target audience and that target market. We offer the ability to compete with competitors in a more competitive way. So how can you make sure that you're on top of mind for companies, right? So if you're a small IPA in a region that's lesser known, it's going to be very difficult to compete with, you know, the advertising dollars of a big Gulf state or somewhere, an American state, right? But actually there are ways to circumvent that and actually be top of mind for your companies. But quality events is key. I don't think anyone wants to be attending 100 bad events. You want to attend 10 good events and meet people that already know who you are. And there's ways of doing that to educate the market before you go to the event. I think COVID has taught us that you can't sort of wait to come to an event to engage and get business cards. You need to know who's in the room. You need to be talking to people that already know your proposition, your market, and what there is to offer. But value proposition validation is really key. I think we're all in the business of selling, but we actually should be in the business of listening and understanding what it is that your buyer wants. And that's changing. What your buyer wants is changing. But do you know what it is that it's changed to is key. So Glenn's talked a lot about sort of using data insights to uncovering what it is that they're looking to buy. Because they're not going to tell you, hey, I'm looking for a data center warehouse. Because if you don't know that their expansion plan or their last annual report highlighted the need for that, why would they bother to do the homework for you? So unfortunately, we do need to do a bit more homework before talking to our customers. And then lastly, just adding credibility through brand association. So I've talked a lot about the key messages need to match the right medium. Well, you can add credibility to your brand quite easily by partnering with the right people and the right partners so that you can get your message across. So we've been working with DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Centre, for the last 3 years. Some of the content we write is very much not about DIFC, it's about AI and about fintech and about sectors that, you know, their companies that they're trying to attract are interested in, to attract these as pull messages, not push messages. So we're not in the sort of 80s and 90s where we're just trying to sell things anymore. We do need to listen, to engage, and bring more people in. Just before we have a coffee break, I just want you to do one more vote, and then we'll go through the results quickly at the end. So if you could please get out your phones again. If anyone that's just walked in, there's free AdNet Wi-Fi. You need to go on to an Internet Explorer and use that Wi-Fi, and then use your sort of email to verify your Wi-Fi. But how do you identify and target the right companies for your location? That we've got to give the room over, so we're going to try to get through the last half quite quickly. So, Glenn.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot on this, and I think what we were foreseeing was that it was going to be a little bit more well balanced. But you know, straight away there, connecting with key decision makers. The one thing that I would point out on that, and if we can just focus on connecting with non-key decision makers and connecting with key decision makers, there's a massive gap, an absolute massive gap, and obviously everybody wants to connect with the person that's going to say yes to the project, but do you have a better in with that person than maybe an analyst in his or her team? Most of the time, no. So why would you not connect or try to connect with non-key decision makers as well, who can, you know, if they're reading your material, they're accessing your information, all it takes is for them to drop your location name in a team meeting or at a board meeting, and then you can actually connect. You're getting that connection with the key decision maker. So that's one interesting part of this. In-person events, very high. Yes, we've discussed that one before. Inbound inquiries. I think this again is another key topic. Everyone wants to receive those inbound inquiries. People call up and that just want to invest in your location, but it's very hard. It's not. You should be trying to get new business development in there as well. Generating lists of companies, we talked about that as well. I think there's a much bigger process involved in that, and definitely digitalization can help with that. In refining that list, and we've done this a lot with clients who maybe say, I want to target tech companies. Well, do you do that by revenue? Do you do it by the number of employees that potentially they might put in a certain location? So there's various different ways. And what type of tech? Do they need to be using cloud? Do they need to be using mobile? Again, going back to the themes that we discussed before. Is there any, Polly, just down the bottom of the list? I just want to make sure I haven't missed any. List of FDI companies, FDI data, so nearly half with that, and very low. So everybody, most people are proactively targeting companies in various different ways. I just want to look at the intermediaries because that was one of the findings before. Yeah, so about half are targeting intermediaries as well. So that's good, but a lot of these I think could be pushed up the funnel a bit more. Social media quite low as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a cheat in the sense that we wanted to sort of see how many people were still sort of operating in the traditional method and how many people have sort of adopted a digital first approach and how much of that is weighted. And I think we've covered a lot of these, but I think relying on inbound inquiries will always be, like I said, that's the 10% of people that actually know who you are, who bothered to come to your website, who bothered to pick up the phone, who want to talk to you because someone either told them to or what have you. But actually digital methods allow you to access the other 70 to 80% of people that you didn't even know or they didn't even know who you were. So being proactive, I think there's a scale of what proactive means here. I think only 5% of people said they're not proactive, whoever they are need to talk to us very quickly. But in terms of being proactive, I think it's not just about coming to an event. That's still the inactive side of proactive. There is still another way of being even more aggressive with your digital approach. So we can highlight here some of the digital first approaches that we recommend is to generate company lists by sector and subsector. So Glenn, I mean subsector, it sounds like you're getting into the weeds of things, but why is that important?
Yeah, well I think as I said there, you're not just targeting a tech company. Are you targeting a SaaS company? Are you targeting a company that's going to do computer programming? Are they going to open an R&D center? Are companies going to open manufacturing operations? So you want to get down into that niche area. And again, you want to be promoting material in that niche area, not just saying we're a tech hub and leaving it at that. What areas of tech? Tech's always evolving. There's many niche areas within that, so be focused on the areas that you have real strengths in. And to go back to the point I made as well, it's about generating that list, so not just putting in the old school SIC code 70 or whatever, 72 for software companies. That's a very old method of doing that, and there's much more fruitful digital means now of accessing company lists.
I want to also highlight that Glenn's worked very hard at producing an FDI report which we're releasing on Tuesday morning. It's focused on Middle East and Africa, and one of the key things that I noticed that the report, and I don't want to give too much away, but that data centers were sort of an area for Africa, and obviously there's been a huge explosion of data center investment. So you can imagine the subsector that follows. You might want to change the fact that now that you have a next-gen data center, what are the subsectors that are most attractive? 5G, IoT. You can imagine that changes quite quickly, and so therefore you can't rely on just targeting tech, BPO, it's too broad. So hopefully we made the point there. Online events and webinars. So I know there was a bit of a huge spike and then everyone sort of signed up to things but never actually attended. But how can we use webinars in a more effective way?
Well, I think it's just it's access to a wider range of people. So as we talked about at the start, you don't need that US investor to come to your location. You can actually access that investor, and it's moving people along that sales funnel, along your pipeline as well. So actually getting them to attend a webinar is an achievement in itself. And then you're putting across your proposition, and also within these webinars, what are you actually talking about? Are you just doing a sales pitch? Again, I would advise against doing that for the most part of it. You do want to bring that in, but you want to talk about the industry trends. So you want to talk about a topic, so AI, fintech. You want to talk about the changing nature of these industries. Yes, you might have a business development person or your head of your agency in there to give the perspective of why your location's the best foreign location to do that. But you also want to bring in companies as well. What are companies doing in these areas? How are they evolving? And ideally a company that has invested into your location and been successful. So you don't need to go to town and be doing a webinar every single week. So don't be put off by the fact that these can be difficult to do, but they're also something that once you do one or two or three, it just started to become a lot easier, and it starts to become a lot more of a flow of what should be your FDI strategy.
I'd also say that, reserve webinars and online events for people that you already know. So if you can generate those leads and you can further qualify them, use them for the sort of people that you need to convert, as opposed to sort of start using it as a way to find new audiences. I think it is harder to sort of get people to attend webinars when they don't know who you are, unless it is on a theme, like you said, like AI.
Well, back to the way that we do it is we get the dashboard of people that are viewing the content first, so they've some sort of interest in the articles that you're writing, and then we can invite them to a webinar. So again, pushing them down the funnel that bit more to see how interested are they actually in your offering.
But non-key decision makers voted very, very low.
Yeah, as I think I've covered that one. Target non-key, not necessarily target, but connect with these people and try and identify their connections with the key decision makers. So just don't rule them out just because they don't have the decision making power.
But I think, to be fair, it's perhaps a lot of platforms that are out there offering sort of investment promotion. It's a one-to-one approach. It's not a one-to-many approach. So if you can cost-effectively target non-key decision makers as well as key decision makers, I'm sure you won't rule that out.
Yeah.
So I think it's just knowing that there are tools out there that allow you to target non-key decision makers, and they're the ones that influence the managers. Say, well, no, I would never move to Shanghai. Why are you trying to get me to do that? If they're not on board, there is no chance that that company is going to expand. List of companies that have read content. So one of our methodologies is to get people to read content about you, about the theme, about the sector or location, and then to sort of see who read that, so we can actually provide you with real-time information about which companies have read your content and shown interest. They've bothered to actually sit there for a minute to read an article. They've bothered to actually put in their information to say, contact me, to download a white paper or a report about your region, or hopefully about a thought leadership topic like AI and how it's impacting their industry, which is going to be much more interesting to them. So providing them value. So using information and dynamic feedback. So we were talking earlier about using dynamic feedback. Well, if you don't know that there are tools that can give you this, then I understand why perhaps that's not high on your agenda. But lists of companies, your FDI database, I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, well, I think everyone still should be using in that regard to know what companies are doing. So maybe not in your location, but what was the investment project that they undertook, and to try and use that for your advantage whenever you want to go in and speak to a company. And as I said, you don't want to have a company here, you've got your proposition here, you need to join the dots with that as well. So what are the points that's going to marry that? So being able to speak to a company and say, we understand that you've invested in XYZ, here's our offering that's in these similar areas. So you still absolutely have to be using that. Couple it as well with other databases, and we've seen that that's one of the issues that a lot of the people in this room have. But can you be targeting companies who are innovative? So we've got a patents database, for example. So you can see if Samsung you can see all of its FDI projects that it's done, and then you can see where it's innovating as well. So if your pitch is to try and attract a tech company to do a particular type of operation, you can join these dots. Again, if you're speaking to that company, you can say, we understand you've been innovating in these areas, we've got hiring trends, they're hiring more abroad, and we can understand it's greenfield investment. So it's more information about that company and pulling that all into one single source.
Just a quick example, I've got a client who actually is in an African country, and rather than targeting globally and saying, I just want the tech, the cloud, whatever, they actually said, let's look at companies that have invested in the region, not in my country obviously, but other countries neighbouring, and let's just focus in on those, because clearly if they see the value in investing in our neighbouring country, they might actually see the value of expanding into theirs. So I think it's about being smarter and working with, and being a bit more choosy and prioritising key markets based on intelligence and investor signals. The last point here is using things like ESG scores, which some people might not know are available, ranking companies by whether or not they're ESG. Why is that important if you're shaping your policies?
Well, I think now, especially where I'm from, this is a key thing now in terms of the consumer base. Consumers want to purchase from companies that are very reputable, and that's maybe not happening throughout the rest of the world yet, but this is the transition that's happening. So in order to So, for example, in Invest Northern Ireland, if they were to bring in a company that was highly pollutant, that's not going to go down well with the public. agency's going to come under pressure, government's going to get sacked. Not that we have a government anyway, separate issue. But so you want to be targeting the right types of companies that are going to have a positive benefit to your, so is it again energy transition, one of the key themes that we talked about, and also the types of companies in terms of maybe female ownership or leadership. These are the things that we want to progress as a society. So people will only spend their hard-earned dollars on companies that are doing well on these areas. So you don't want to put all your time and effort to attract a company that's then going to be viewed very negatively by the public. So yeah, it's definitely an important factor.
Yeah, you're painting what the economy looks like in 2 years' time, so it's a very big role and responsibility. So.
And also, I would say for agencies as well to be promote yourselves. Again, back to another point of you are the brand ambassadors for your location. So can you do something with ESG yourself? Can you get an ESG score? And maybe companies that will only want to work with locations that have the same emphasis on ESG that they have.
So we've gotten to the point which I love, is working smarter, not harder. We all sort of find ourselves with less and less time. So, I mean, in our experience, having worked with a lot of marketing people, but also business development teams and strategy teams, I often find that although I think you'd probably like to think that your organization all talks together, have, team meetings and things like that, I find that their goals are often misaligned. And so they will send a brief to one agency of this, and then you go talk to the business development team. It's like, well, no, that's rubbish. I want to do this. So how can you make sure that you're working smarter? Communication obviously is key, and are you all on the same page? Are you all telling the same story? Are you all using that digital first approach? Because I think salespeople, myself included, sometimes might think, well, actually, it might take too long for the marketing team to execute on that, but actually there are ways to get feedback and results earlier on in the cycle. So I don't think that, as long as you're all on the same page, that's one thing that's key. I think this is something that you're sort of quite keen on when we do data exchanges with people, and do you want to go through a bit of that?
Well, I just think, again, it comes back to the website and other areas where you need to be presenting this information. We don't live in a society now where information is hidden. So you need to be promoting as much information to an investor as possible, or else they'll go and get it from somewhere else and they'll go to a competitor location. So I think this is really, really key. Back to the website, make sure that the information's all up to date on your website, but make sure that you have the knowledge as well and it's staying up to date, but you're sharing that with investors through things like thought leadership. So there's a multitude of ways that you can share information as well, and through different channels. And that could be multifaceted in terms of you can write an article and then you could have one of your business development team doing a video of it. One of our old friends in the Murcia region of Spain, he videos himself talking about FDI wins and talking about a new company, and he's standing there with the company name in the background and he's singing his praises. Again, it's very engaging. Every time I scroll across it on Twitter, I always stop and look at it. How many other agencies are doing that? Not many. Again, on LinkedIn, you're going to stop and view that. So information like that there is very important, and it's different ways of doing it. So again, try and stay ahead of the game on that.
But I think also intra-company sharing, for example, I see a lot of the time a new CRM system's been elicited by or commissioned by the BD team, but the marketing team don't have the right taxonomy to feed into the CRM system, or vice versa. The marketing team have a whole bunch of leads, but they haven't been categorized in the way that business development like to process it. So I think just understanding that you need to categorize and catalog data in the same way so that you're all working smarter and not harder, and having to unscramble the data that you've worked so hard to obtain. Partnerships, I think it's really, really key. I think the roadmap earlier felt a bit daunting, but I think the key message for us is you don't have to do it all. And we often find that IPAs, especially the ones that are challenged with resources, trying to do it all, try to target every single sector. So I think if we haven't made a point here, it's about prioritizing and working smarter here, and perhaps working with different channels, different marketing channels, different data providers, or leveraging your partnerships that you already have. So we've come to a part where I'm very close to my heart. I've worked in PR and communications for a long time, and I think one of the key things here is a lot of the time IPAs, not just IPAs, companies, they come to us and they say, I want to talk about ourselves, I want to sell my value proposition, this is what I do, this is what we're best at, but actually it almost doesn't matter. It's what the audience wants to hear. It's what the audience is listening to. But first of all, do you know what your audience is reading? Do you know what your audience is engaging with? And how do you have an opinion on what they actually care about? So companies in technology obviously are talking about AI, generative AI. Do you have an opinion about that? And if you don't, that's fine. There are plenty of experts out there that would lend their voice to your brand if you provide them the right platform. A webinar to talk about generative AI, but working, on behalf of your IPA or your company. So you don't have to be experts. There are plenty of experts out there, so bring those people in. And I think educate is the key word. Don't sell, and listen, and don't just create pull messages, and make sure that your brand awareness is top of mind, because like I said earlier, if you're focusing on the 10% of people that actually came in to your website, filled out a form, you're missing out on the 90% that didn't know who you are, who don't know that you exist, who don't know you care about that topic or their industry. And lastly, I guess don't be too salesy, which sounds easy, but it's actually very, very difficult to not want to talk about yourself. But I think if we can agree that knowing more about your customer is the way to do it, then that is always a key. And I think a data-driven approach, if we haven't sort of said it, is really important, and that can be used in your storytelling. So using data about the economic data of how many companies have invested in creating a 5G network in your country could be something that would pique the interest of a company that's interested in your 5G networks. So it's using data to tell your story, but then it's also using data to inform whether your campaign's performing, whether or not it's doing well, whether or not you're reaching the right people. So as a media organization, we've invested in AI and machine learning and behavioral data so that we can understand what kind of users are reading our content, and effectively we can help our partners and our clients to target the right company at the right time. And therefore creating the right sort of ROI and KPIs, because ultimately, we don't want to just sort of say that, hey, we've put up an ad, I hope someone's read it. No, those days are over. We do need to share information and create demand, which is quite key. But check your channels. I think we talked a little bit about how to understand the different mediums that you've got. I think not many people voted for social media, which I thought would have been higher, but perhaps it's not just about social media, it's about tapping and integrating your other channels like media partners into social media. So any content you might do with a media partner can be used on social, can be promoted on social. Those sort of things are ways. Cross-promoting is really important to improve your ROI on any partner that you do use. And then the last one is the right channel, right content. I mean, I think you wouldn't put thought leadership, 1,000 words on social media. It's just not the right place. People are not there to receive those kind of messages. But it might be better on your own website. It might be better on a video. It might be better with a media partner or through one of your partner channels. So just make sure you're adapting the right channel for your message and using your partners as much as possible. We have a great client who sees the value of this, and we actually went out to 93 ministers, ambassadors, clients, and what we did was actually interviewed them to tell their story. And that was way more effective than interviewing that IPA's executives, who obviously know their story really well, but they used the ambassador storytelling method to increase their reach. And then lastly, optimize and refresh. So I think a lot of you voted that you went back to the same strategy after COVID, and we find that actually technology's moved on, platforms have moved on, social media has moved on. You really do need to optimize and keep checking that your roadmap is on point to use up-to-date content. I think you go through so many IPA websites. You're a jury member this year, and having to go through all of that, you do see that there is a lot of outdated content. But again, you don't have to have someone just sitting there filling out blogs. There is generative AI, something called ChatGPT. I mean, you can be creating content for your website quite quickly without having to necessarily hire someone, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but there are ways of sort of making things more efficient. But A/B testing is something that we use in marketing a lot, but this could be used for your business development strategy. It doesn't have to just be in a marketing sense, and I think that's really important. And then always having a digital first approach so that, God forbid, something like COVID happens again, you do have something that allows you to engage with a wider market very quickly. So, Glenn, I mean, is this your experience? Have you found that, the communication methodology has changed over the time that you've sort of worked with IPAs? Are they getting better at telling thought leadership stories?
Yes, but definitely getting better, but I would still say that it's nowhere near the level that it needs to be at. And that is one of the things about how people absorb information. Any of us want to go and buy anything, what's the first thing we do? Now, even if we're in that shop, the first thing we'll do is we'll take out our phone, we'll search for it, and we'll see if we can get it cheaper. So online, the real drive is to be online and to be producing content so that you come across as that expert in that industry. So thought leadership is extremely important. That's the one level of communication that I think does need to be leveraged even more so than what's being done at the minute. And this doesn't mean that you need to be producing content that goes out every single day or every single week, but try and have a strategy plan that's going to work, that's going to include this. And even if it is something like doing one a month and doing a webinar once every quarter at the start, test it out, see how it works, and then ramp it up as well if it's being successful, which it should be.
So we've just come to the end of our presentation. I'm aware that there is a workshop straight after, so we will try to whiz through this last part. But look, our approach, we talked a lot about the problems out there and some of the pain points, but I think our approach to this is to make sure that you're targeting the right company at the right time, and that's using intelligence, real insights, up-to-date insights that is up-to-date. The quality content, as I mentioned earlier, thought leadership that will really engage the companies and the audiences or your customers rather than just talking about yourself. And then using a digital-first AI-enabled approach to getting out to a larger market so that you're not wasting time on just talking to 10% of the market, but making sure that you have measurable, actionable data insights as a result. So that in itself is return on investment. And then lastly, the sort of lead nurturing is a really important part of it. And Glenn, you sort of helped with some of this as well in the prioritization. I mean, can you just quickly tell us sort of how you sort of prioritize leads? Because we almost have a problem with having too many leads to some clients.
Yeah, well, you get a list of companies that are reading your content, but are any of them actually doing any FDI? So that's the first thing that you can prioritize very quickly. Put that into an order, and then if there's any other features, so are they in the right sector, are they the right company size that you're looking for? So there's various different ways that you can refine that prioritization, and then you want to get insights about that company as well. So you don't want to get a list of names, you want to actually understand a bit about that company so that whenever you're passing these leads to your business development team, they're able to understand what that company has done, again, the interest that they have in your article. You want to understand their FDI history. You want to understand a little bit about them, how innovative they've been. You want to understand how their hiring is going, and you want to marry that with your proposition.
So this is our dashboard that we would provide when we work with clients to sort of show them how well their campaign is doing. You can sort of see here you've got the date range, so you can actually make sure you're getting the real-time data for the reporting that you might need to do for your stakeholders that you need to convince. It shows you how many different companies have read your content on our sites. But not just one site, we actually publish and syndicate the content across our 36 B2B websites that I said that we have. And then it shows you the kind of viewers of your content. So who's engaging with your content? How many page views did that get? It's just interesting that Invest Qatar read this, this article 3 times, for example. So unfortunately, with social media and digital, there's no hiding these days. So how can you use this information to inform your campaign and make you work smarter and not harder, and then tell you sort of how well your campaigns are doing? And we've had a great response from people on this because it just provides another layer of information that they didn't have access to before. And if you didn't know that this was available, I guess you wouldn't know to look for it. But this is something that I think is helping IPAs, especially ones that are not the national brand, to really penetrate new markets and get into new locations quite quickly and get new clients or investors. So as you can sort of see here, again, you can sort of filter your leads list by country, by region, by job title even, and company, so that you can actually activate your business development part of the marketing campaign. So the business development team can use our dashboard as a way to sort of source leads and find out more about, say you're going to a road show in Qatar, for example, you might want to download a list of companies that have already engaged in your content and downloaded a lead, or downloaded a white paper report, and generated a lead for your campaign. So this is all about sort of creating demand, which is a very different approach to the traditional method, which is waiting for people to come to your website or using events to sort of drive demand, and educating people while you're doing that. And the dashboard allows you to connect directly on LinkedIn, to call them or to email them, which again, it's just providing a one-stop shop solution, which I know we all like to use that sort of term, so you don't have to orientate and use different databases. And you can download this as an Excel sheet as well. So again, it's all about sort of integrating it into your CRM and into your systems. So just very quickly, we've got a very, very short video of how this all works. I think, Polly, I need you to click on the button here, if you don't mind. So this is just an example of one of the companies that has engaged with this campaign. And as you can sort of see here, it has a list of key employees that you can research. And I think the big thing, a take home, if nothing else, it's about being proactive. So researching the companies on the company level and thinking about your customers as already a customer or a company that's invested, and looking at, for example, their SWOT analysis. Are they expanding in your region? Have they done investments in the region? Is it part of their corporate strategy to invest in your region? And this will help you to understand how to have a conversation with that key decision maker or non-key decision maker in a more meaningful way. It also helps you to identify sort of competitors. So again, you're not working smarter, not harder. So if you talk to one mining company, you can go talk to their competitors in the same day. I think some of the deals database that we have, for example, on acquisitions and JVs and capital raisings, also provides color to a conversation you might be having with a potential investor. If you can say, oh, I saw that you invested in a factory in a neighboring country, it's going to be a lot more of a fruitful conversation than if you didn't understand that they just did that. So I think it's about using data to inform your business development conversations. And some of the clients that we've been working with have provided us with some really interesting sort of feedback. And in the case of Abu Dhabi Investment Office, they came to us during COVID lockdowns when they weren't able to travel. We gave them the ability to sort of tell a story to new markets without having to get on a plane. And what was quite interesting is that we interviewed quite a few, this is 90 odd ministers and companies and ambassadors to really tell their story to the wider audience. And from that, we generated something like 30,000 page views, as you can sort of see, and over 300 leads, and 73% of them are C-suite. And the reason for that is because we were very targeted with the industries, subsectors, and companies that we targeted, so that we're not wasting time talking to companies that would potentially never invest in Abu Dhabi. We also have an example of Surprise, Arizona, who had a lot more of a direct need as a free zone, or they had free zones and space that they're looking to lease. And from telling their story on our media platform, they were able to sell something like 2 square miles of land to industrial investors. So it can be used in a very broad sense, but also in a very sort of targeted sense as well. And the key to all of this is knowing which company to target and having a platform to do that in real time. Just a sort of plug for the report that Glenn will be presenting on Tuesday morning. You're all very welcome to join us at a breakfast event that we're hosting downstairs on Tuesday morning. If you scan this code, it is a link to RSVP. If you have a premium pass, which you all do, you're able to attend. But Glenn, did you want to just give us some cheeky highlights of what they can expect from this FDI report?
Yeah, I know very quickly because I think the other session's about to start. But so there's going to be a big drive on digitalization. We're going to look at the regional splits as well. So what's happening? What are the top sectors in Africa? What are the top sectors in the Middle East? There's going to be a big focus on the UAE and Dubai in particular being the leading destination globally for greenfield FDI. So please do come along.
And I think if we haven't sort of honed it home, I think these are the 3 things that we'd like you to take home from today's session. To be more dynamic, and I think we've hopefully shown you ways that you can pivot, especially from key milestone things like COVID and geopolitical risks. Trying new tools and ways of working smarter, not harder. To be more digital, to always have a digital first approach, because I think we're all very used to the traditional approach. We know that very well. It's about trying new things and being competitive and leveraging new data tools and digital tools to help do the job of many people, so a one-to-many approach. And then lastly, to be more data-driven, to incorporate data at the top and at the bottom, so incorporating it into your storytelling, into your databases, but also into how you sort of measure the success of things. Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
No, I think that covers.
So I'm very conscious that we're running behind schedule. So just very last minute, if you could provide us a little bit of feedback as to today's session, we would love that. If you just scan this QR code, that would really help us with understanding how we can help you better. But that would be fantastic. And then just very last minute, we've got on the next page just information on how to contact us if you'd like to reach out for a one-to-one demo to meet with Glenn. We can talk through some of the sort of FDI projects of available for your location and talk through a more sort of bespoke strategy for you. But thank you so much for your time today, guys. I really appreciate it, and I hope you found this useful.